What
I
about the
couldn't.
other way around, though? Is there any forms of exploitation to animals that you would call not cruel?
Uh, I mean, let's say, yeah, actually, yeah. So like, roadkill would probably be one of those, right? Or actually,
Oh,
not even roadkill.
let's
Let's
say
go.
living animals,
Let's
though.
say. Well, you did ask specifically, right, where it applies. So I at least
Okay.
actually let me go from roadkill to an animal that died in nature
Okay.
without having any exploitation done to it. His body just is there, and then so it didn't nothing no cruelty happened to it, but then you take the body. Now you've taken the body from it.
Hmm.
And this is, I think this will lead into our conversation about the feather and the roadkill and the freeganism and the dumpster
Hmm.
diving and all that, right? So like,
Okay. Well, just to preface getting into that, and then you take the floor. This is an example I try to give people when they say they see concern with using a dead animal's body, and aside from the slippery slopes and all this stuff, just putting it in a vacuum. If you took you randomly find this dead deer out in the forest, you put it inside of a metal box. As some time goes by, I don't know how much time, when you look in that box, it'll look like soil. It'll just look like soil and bones.
mhm,
So in some way or another, like if using that soil is exploitation because that soil was part of this what used to be a body and now it's decomposed, and that deer just stayed out in the forest, it decomposed and became soil out there, everybody's going to use it. I just have a hard time viewing the use of, like, calling an animal a dead animal an animal, or calling a dead human a human. It might be worth calling it, this is a dead human, and then this is a human. The live one is a human. So, anyways, break it down however you want, but I kind of wanted that idea of the dirt, the soil of a decomposed deer in your mind.
yeah. So I have kind of covered the composting thing a little bit here. So what I'll say here is that it's not even so much a slippery slope that people are worried about. It's really the edge case. So, like for example, when we're talking about a feather, and we're talking about picking up this feather, it's not attached to the animal anymore. This bird is long gone. Why is it still exploitation to take the feather and then use it in your art? Well, to me, the answer is because in the edge case somebody could use your same logic, turn around and do something else with that logic. And it's the same thing when we're trying to tell people, like, you can't use nature to justify morality, because if you do, then all of a sudden now you have things like, is it just to eat your babies? Is it just to, I guess, you know, other animal things that we're definitely we wouldn't do as humans, right? Like there's a ton of
Mm-hmm.
immoral actions that if we did as humans, like copying these animals, it would just be, it would be it, it would be the edge case to which we say this is why it doesn't work, because you use that logic and all of a sudden you're over here on the edge doing this thing over here.
I
So
don't know
you
if I
went.
see the comparison, but can you just real quick explain to me what an example of an edge case with the feather would be?
Yeah, so that's what I'm sorry, that's what I'm trying to do. So
Oh,
the
okay.
edge case. Oh, so I was going to get there. So the edge case to the feather is, hey, you've taken this feather. The bird doesn't care because the bird, has basically, it's not even, it has no care that you took its feather. It's essentially discarded it, right? The edge
Hmm.
case is that now you've taken the feather off the dead body, off the dead body of the bird. So the edge case is you use
Mm.
the same logic to get to, hey, I'm not gonna take this feather off the ground. I'm gonna take this feather off the dead body. And so now what we have to do is we have to look at it in a situation where, okay, just throw the bird out, put a human in that spot, and now
Hmm.
what do we get? So people will look at the situation where the human hair falls out and lands on the ground, and then the human goes off and does something else, and that the human doesn't care about the hair anymore. it's
Hmm.
it's not a moral or immoral thing to take that hair.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like the bird is concerned, uh, that was the comparison to the feather just being on the ground. But let's say
Hmm.
it's not the feather on the ground. Let's say it's the feather on the body. So the same thing applies with a human. You have hair. If somebody walks up to a dead body, a human dead body, cuts the hair off the body, we would say, well, that person is taking something from a body that should have the dignity to be respected due to the fact that formerly it was sentient. We tend
Hmm.
to, as a society, respect people's bodies after they die because we understand that although they may not be sentient anymore, it's still the case that their dignity is alive, that their essence as a body, is still formally recognizing or pointing to their previous former self when they were sentient. Right, the
Okay.
body is in a way sacred that way because things like, hey, because now we can get in the conversation of like, well, when a body dies, what can we use from that body? And you would
Okay.
might if it's a human, we would probably say, well, if you don't have the consent, you can't use any of that body. That belongs to that person, even though they are dead. And if they ahead of time give you consent to use their body, aka take their organs or use their skin or something for science, who knows what they want to use it for, right? Or give consent for, but they give
Hmm.
consent explicitly to what they want it to be used for. Now you
Yeah.
can't take that skin and then like take somebody's
Make a lampshade.
you make a lampshade or put it on, transfer it to somebody else's body. Like you can't just like,
Yeah.
take it without their permission. So in the same way, why are we not extending that to
Yeah.
animal bodies? And it
Let,
and
let
that's
me tell
why.
you. Let me tell you which parts I agree with and disagree with. That way, you can know where to go next to try to convince me. Um, so I agree with you that as a society, we citizens can let our representatives know what we want. We can talk about it. It can be this well-known thing, and then whatever we decide as a society with our lawmakers, in real life, not my project I'm working on, they these things can go into law that don't affect what I would call morality. So, if I was living out in nature and somebody died and I wanted to use one of their bones in some way or put it on a necklace or something, and I wanted to, let's imagine human flesh was healthy for humans to consume and I wanted to consume their flesh or whatever, like I wouldn't consider these things immoral in any way. But if in a society, everybody decides, hey, we want to respect this body, that's what we do here in the US. You can't do any of these things to this body. And I think that's fine. I think that is a legal decision that has no connection to morals. It's us
So
doing something that I think is perfectly fine to call silly, but we all have to be governed by the same law, even if
so
half of us
I
don't
will I
care.
will explain why I think it is moral, and not just an etiquette thing. Because it sounds to me
Hmm.
like you're saying like, hey, this is actually nothing to do with right or wrong. It actually is just how we have established etiquette within our human culture. We just don't do
Yeah.
this to bodies, blah blah blah.
And let me point out
Now,
real quick, just before you do that, I feel the same way with birds. So right now, if somebody found a dead bird and they didn't feel like there was a problem pulling a feather out, I don't care. But if our society decided that we respect birds so much that if anybody ever got caught pulling a feather out of a dead bird, that it would be illegal, I wouldn't fight that law. That's a fine law. I think that will probably become a law. And I'm not currently fighting the idea of letting humans not be tampered with. So I wouldn't fight that law. I just don't. I wouldn't
so
put it in law either.
So the reason why it's a moral issue is because when this happens to somebody's family member, where you have people grieving that this
Hmm.
person just died, and then someone else completely unrelated comes in and essentially disturbs those remains, you have committed a harm that would normally universally be affecting those individuals. So
Hmm.
you had a close relationship with your grandma, and then somebody goes to the graveyard and decides, hey, I'm going to take grandma's bones and turn them into a bone stew, and then they
Hmm.
consume that. Um, you see how that can cause harm to the family, right?
Yeah, anything can cause
So
harm
would
to
it not?
somebody if they have certain beliefs. Correct.
But it's different from etiquette because etiquette is an offense that like you don't have a universal application for. So like uh so that means in one culture, if you do it to them, they're not going to be offended, but if you do it in this culture, they will be offended. That's typically what etiquette is referring
100%.
to, whereas the harm caused by the action of destroying, somebody's family member's remains is going to universally affect people
Mm-mm.
around, regardless of what culture they're in.
Okay, well, let me give you an example. Well, I could probably find a real example, but I'm going to give you a hypothetical example. And we have to accept that humans are all different and feel different ways. But, like, let's imagine there was a tribe, a small tribe, that maybe did some things that we find unique. I'm sure you've seen things on tribes that do things that are unique. But let's say that they were obsessed with their homemade version of soccer or non-American football. Um, and this was just like the ultimate thing of this tribe. Everybody plays soccer. They love this thing. And when somebody dies, they think the ultimate sign of respect is playing soccer with their head. That's their send off is this person that loves soccer so much their head gets to be kicked around like a ball, and it's like because they think it's such a high level of respect, similar to sacrificing virgins to the sun gods back in the Aztec days. It sounds crazy, but this group of people. That's what they decided as a culture and a community. And so far, this tradition hasn't gone out of fashion. And so somebody dies, and where somebody else would watch and go, "Oh my gosh, that's their mom's head they're kicking around." But to these people, they're feeling so much joy that this thing's happening. Anyways,
So say you say
yeah,
you took say you took that head and you kept them from playing their game.
exactly.
Is that
So
not
it's
the same as
etiquette.
disturbing the remains? And well,
It comes
do you,
down
do
to
you see
whatever the
though that
culture wants.
the etiquette is the way they handle the remains. The disruption to the remains is the moral qualm. So if their
Interesting.
etiquette is to take the head and kick it around because I don't know, that's what they believe, then
Mhm.
you taking that head would affect them negatively. And that's what I'm
Yes.
saying is the universal qualm here is that you're disturbing the remains. They don't
Universally,
get
there
to,
is
they
a
don't,
there is a disturbance that can take place. It would be whatever is outside of the traditions and the norms. So in that society, if they decided in their group of 1,000 that want to kick heads around, that not allowing the head to be kicked around would be wrong, then I think it's fine for that society to decide that. Now, I don't think it's right for a wrong, an immoral action like sacrificing a living human or making people suffer. I don't think that can be right because of culture. So I mostly just said that for anybody listening that thinks I'm saying if a culture decides something, it's fine. I'm not. But I'm saying once somebody's dead, there's no suffering involved. Um, a society deciding to kick the head
but
around,
there would be
that's their
suffering if you
decision.
disturbed the remains before they got a chance to actually they put them to rest in
But
whatever
only
way
because of
they
their
do that.
group agreed on decision. We don't have a group agreed on decision
But
about
the
taking feathers
harm
out of
is
birds.
universal. The harm is universal to humans because if
What?
your family member if your family member has their body disturbed before you get to the chance to perform your funeral, like
Mm-hmm.
say instead of you kick the head around, you just lay the body for viewing, and then somebody steals the head, that would
Mm-hmm.
universally cause harm. In the same way, if they kick the head around because that's how they do their funerals, then essentially, if you took the head from them, you would be causing them harm because
Yeah.
now they cannot get closure. And that's what you're doing is you're taking away their closure. And so you
Okay.
are
Let me.
causing a universal harm. So it is a moral thing.
I see the mistake. I think you're wrong. I usually think you're right about most things, more right than I am, which is why I take notes to change things to what you say. I think you're wrong here, though. Okay, so imagine there's a society like ours that doesn't want bodies disturbed at all. The family members put them in the ground, and you can go to the gravesite and see it. Then you got that's society A. Society B is the kick the head around one, and then let's say society C, another tribe, maybe 1,000 people, maybe 1 million. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They when their people die, they just set them anywhere. They just go put them in the forest or they set them down. They don't care. There's no agreed upon thing here. Anybody that gets to them can get to them. Wild animals can eat them. If a human gets to them, they can. Some people will leave their loved ones dead naked. Some will dress them up in their favorite suits or whatever and put on jewelry that the dead women loved or whatever. But there's no law and there's no standard of can somebody go and take those clothes and steal them or whatever. So in this society, their standard is there's no standard. And so I guess
Well, their
I'm trying.
standard is leaving the body as it is, right? I mean, is
Their
that
standard is leaving the body without, like, at time after time, whatever people do to the dead bodies in the society, nobody stands up and says, "Hey, as a society, we need to put a stop to any of this." They just don't care. They don't even care about necrophilia. They don't. They say once the body's dead, they just don't view that as anything of importance at all, and it just gets sent out. In fact, they don't even
so?
do it themselves.
Is
There's
there
just
is this strictly hypothetical, or is this also, could we point to one example in real life
nope.
where
We're
this
just going
is
to
the
call it
case?
hypothetical.
Okay, so I
And
would say
yeah.
I would say if there's a species, like, I mean, it could be human, right? Or, well, no, let's call it human
Oh, actually, it's not
two.
hypothetical. Sorry, it's how we treat birds in the U.S. But it's hypothetical for if it was humans.
Exactly, yeah. And that's why I'm saying, like, in the human context, that wouldn't be the case. We wouldn't actually have that be the occurrence. We can't even point to a single instance where a culture has, like, basically discarded with the mourning process altogether. Because in that situation, you're saying that there is no mourning process for us to disturb. And so the question is already kind of getting around the qualm by saying that, hey, whatever you're pointing at as the problem doesn't exist right now. So, like, let's pretend that doesn't exist. Is it still immoral? Well, you negated the qualm by saying that we, as a in this particular
I don't think this
hypothetical,
hypothetical is too
well,
unrealistic. Like my
what
closest
would
loved
be
one, if they
realistic?
died,
Let's just say it's an alien species, right? That, because if we go to the alien species, now we kind of have a thorough understanding of, like, hey, this is a species that's not human, that's doing it differently. And in their case, they are not even remotely worried about the mourning process at all. They don't have the emotions to do the mourning process. So instead, they just utilize the body for its parts, right? And so
mm-hmm.
my opinion is that in a moral sense, because for humans, we would treat other humans this way, we ought to treat other beings this way. Now, with the aliens, if they're going through in that process and they don't grant that to their own species bodies, where they protect it even after the sentient individual has basically dissipated from death, then in that case, like, they wouldn't look at it as a moral thing, right? So to them, it's not moral. To us as
Mm-hmm.
a species, it's moral. For us,
Yeah.
it's a universal thing. But that's because we have the
What do you mean
necessary
by universal?
attributes.
If there
But
was if there was a
because you
society,
couldn't point to a single example in real life where they
I'm
didn't.
I'm the example. I can find people
So
that agree. Well,
if
hold
you're
on. If I can find people that agree with me, and if me and this group of 999 other people that agree with me, and there has to be more than that, we're in a place. If the closest person to me, my closest loved one, died, not only do I think it should be mandatory due to how our society, like how our earth is, that everybody should be cremated, and I know everybody doesn't agree with that. That's just my personal stance. But if somebody took the body, like once somebody died and it was official, they are dead, there's no coming back. I don't care if some necrophiliac takes the body of my favorite relative, and I don't care. Like, I don't view that as a human anymore. And so I get that people do. I get that there's a respect
you
element
don't
in
view
it.
it as a human. So you're saying that if your grandma, was at the funeral, and then before everybody arrived, somebody took the body out of the casket and
Mhm.
took it back to their house to do whatever they wanted with. Are you not going to? be offended or have some sort of harm result from that? Are you just going to be
It might
totally
not be something
okay?
I want to see, but I have no interest in a funeral either.
But are you totally okay with it? Like, I mean, like,
Yes.
is it so it doesn't harm you in any way when somebody steals your grandma's body?
When somebody steals it, well, now you're saying
Before
steal. I don't view it as a
basically
thing stealable.
I'm saying they're disturbing the mourning process by taking the body, right? And
I don't view
removing it so
like
you cannot mourn the body
for
anymore.
me
It's
personally, I don't
gone.
mourn based on a body. I wouldn't need the body there. I don't need a funeral. I don't need a grave spot to go to. I get that
Mhm.
people do. There are many people that need different things and believe different things, and that's fine. I think that because our society
But is it
values
not
this thing
still
you're talking about,
disturbing the process? Even if you don't personally feel like you need the body, isn't it still disturbing the process if you found out that that your grandma's body was taken and then, brought to some other location? It's you can't do your funeral. Does that not still disturb the process? And the question is,
it would.
does it not cause any harm to you? Because
w-
wouldn't you still be concerned, like, like, hey, we shouldn't just have people taking the bodies of relatives of other humans that it doesn't belong to them, right? It's not their body to take away, and it really is the dignity of the human body that essentially gives it the right to stay undisturbed. That's
I
what I would say.
I'm in favor of when there's a majority that feel that way. Of even if I think it's irrational, I'm in favor of that being something put in law because it doesn't harm me to respect bodies. So I'm fine with it. I don't have any need to
As
disrespect
far as
bodies. But well, hold on, real quick. I just want to point out if there's a dead body of a loved one and somebody took that. Or if there's a dead body of a loved one and that was put in a cremation machine and then there was ashes and somebody took that, I don't view those as any different aside from I'm not used to that, so it'd be weird if I heard about it. I'd be like, "Oh man, that's wild." But only wild because of our society and what I'm used to.
But
But
would it not
no,
cause you
yeah.
harm if somebody stole
Harm?
your
No.
family member's ashes? You
No.
wouldn't be you wouldn't be upset by that
Yeah, like
if
so
somebody stole your family member's
some
ashes.
people need there to be a graveyard where they go visit or whatever. Some people want to do ashes and they need to go put ashes in the ocean of the favorite part of the ocean of that loved one. Some people want to put ashes in a certain spot or whatever. Like I don't view non-alive things as mattering. So like once somebody's dead, I don't view there's so many dead bodies out in the world that now are soil, and I'm not worried about the soil that exists in the world. But it's just a personal thing. I am all in favor of if everybody decided we're going to respect all bodies the same, like instead of letting people like eat roadkill of deer, which I guess is a thing you call in the wildlife of your area company, and you point out that this deer was hit, and then they type it up, and you're registered as allowed to take it and go eat it or whatever. If we decided that we're respecting all, let's say mammals in our country in a way where you can't disturb the body, you can't do whatever, and we just give everything proper burials or whatever. I'm in favor of that. I would
So
try to argue for cremation, but
so
I'm not
so
going to go against that.
for yourself, if
Mhm.
you had a family member die, you wouldn't have a uh you wouldn't care what happened to the body.
Correct. If it was completely up to me, if everybody was gone except my closest loved one ever, and then there's me, and then that person died or whatever, I would not need a place to go visit, like a gravestone or anything like that. If the body was cremated, um, I maybe out of social stuff, whatever, I might think like, okay, for fun, I'm gonna go put this where this person
Okay,
liked to be. But if somebody
let's say
stole
your
the
family
ashes, I
member.
wouldn't blink. I wouldn't care.
Okay, you don't care about the ashes, but let's say uh, your family member died. They're in another room.
Mhm.
You walk into that room and somebody is having sex with the body, and
Okay.
you're coming across this, and they tell you, "Hey, they were dead
Hmm.
before I got here and started doing this. I mean, this isn't a problem, right?" What would you say?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't want a dead body in my house.
But
Second of
it's
all,
there. You walked into it. They had a heart attack or whatever. Let's just say something medically happened. But then somebody else in your house, I don't know. who you live with, but say somebody's in there doing that, what
Hmm.
would be would there be a problem with that?
I don't care what somebody does with a dead body.
Well, I don't think that's the
I,
right answer. I,
I,
I think it matters because like
hopefully it
it
doesn't make me a
would
bad person. I
probably
just don't care.
disturb it would probably disturb you on some level to see that, like to be like, oh shit, like somebody's doing something that's really disgusting here. It's not just the disgust, it's the harm that results from that disgust that is universal to disrupting the mourning process, which is
Correct. I
what
don't
happens when
want
you
that.
disturb the remains.
Well,
So
that's
I'm
one thing
saying
I
it
would
is
care
a
about.
moral thing because it does eventually get to a point where it's like you're disturbed by it because somebody's like doing something wrong, and you can't maybe like point at it every single time. Maybe it's like a
Yeah.
spectrum where like, oh yeah, I plucked a hair off my grandma's head and that wasn't
If
like immoral versus like having, sex with the body. That would be very, very immoral. But basically, even if it's on a spectrum there, even if it hits that spectrum at 1% or even less than 1%, above 0%, we can see that we're crossing a line, and that line is that we're basically disrespecting the individual who used to exist, who we're not going to give any sort of sense of dignity to, which we ought to because other people care. And I'm saying that not just because humans care, but because other animals care too. There are other species out there that will turn around and basically bury the bodies of their family or mourn, and
Mhm.
if another human's like, oh well, I'm gonna go take this gorilla's friend's dead body while they're here mourning, or maybe it's not a gorilla, maybe it's some other animal like a monkey or something, and they're mourning, and they want to bury that body, but then you take that body and you run with it and you steal it and you go eat it, and that animal, that being, is now disturbed by the fact that it can't even mourn because it just saw something that was just like unbelievable happen before its eyes. Like some other
Mhm.
species came and just took the body, this dead body that was to them important in their life. And so, like, this is what ties it back to the bird, is that because in the edge case where you take the feather off the body, even though in some cases there might not be any other birds to witness what's going on, or there might not actually be a being that we can point to that was like, oh, they were harmed this time. The fact that we have a principle that prevents us from crossing that line prevents the
Mhm.
possibility of the immoral harm occurring. And that's the principle of veganism in its face there, basically
Mhm.
preventing us from grabbing the feather, which also prevents us from taking it off the body, which also prevents us from
Mm.
stealing a body from a being that cares about this body, running off with it, eating it, while this other being is suffering as a result of our disturbance to its mourning process.
Yeah.
That's what we do
Well,
with humans. We say, don't do that with
well, hold on,
humans.
hold on.
And
I'm
you may not
curious.
agree.
Do you view the fallen feather from a bird flying and the bird keeps going? It doesn't look back. The feather falls. Do you view that feather the same as like droppings, like if a cow is in the forest and poops, and the idea of taking its manure to use? Do you view those identically?
Uh, I would say if you are the guardian of an animal, you have a
Let's say no
responsibility
guardian. We're
to.
talking nature.
Okay, so if you're not a guardian and you are in the forest and you see some crap in the forest, if you can, you might be able to justify doing something with it, like instead of just
Mhm.
leaving it there. If this thing is ecologically unsound, going to cause disease in your area,
Nope. Let's
spread
say it's not.
disease. Well, if it's not, then just leave it there. You don't need it. Like, why do you
But but
need poop?
but if you wanted to go get a 5 gallon bucket of dirt from the forest, and you could get that dirt and then go and add it to your garden, that or whatever, you wouldn't view the poop as the same because it came from the animal. Like it would have to become unrecognizably broken down to become soil before it's acceptable to use.
No, it probably wouldn't be that. It would probably be more like the territorial autonomy. So if an animal comes onto your property, and like basically is shitting in your garden, and you decide, hey, I'm just gonna throw this piece of crap into my compost, like because I mean, what's the difference between doing that and then spraying it with a garden hose or burying it right then and there? I mean,
Mhm.
you're keeping it off, this garden area that is yours because this is what you need to do to have some more food or
Mhm.
something. um,
Well, let's just
you're
keep it
not
in the forest.
Well, if it's in the forest, then I wouldn't go out looking for animal manure, because like then you get into a situation where it's like, well, what if it's bat guano, you know?
Mhm.
And bat guano, if people are going out and collecting bat guano to put into fertilizer, they are going to commodify it. And if I can't say that that is, immoral, then what's going to happen is a line's going to be crossed. And essentially, what'll happen is, because you're um, going into the territory of another animal, that's the line there that says, hey, I'm essentially, this isn't mine anymore. It doesn't belong to me anymore. And it doesn't necessarily belong to you even when it is on your property, but you have a justification, which is stewarding, that is, hey, I need to remove this feces because it's going to cause like some sort of disease. So if you don't have that justification, then there's no reason for you to go and take it, because then it will become like I get that it's droppings and these animals aren't going to use those droppings, but if it's their territory and we're entering their territory, we're going to probably cause interference eventually. Humans just do that. We
Mhm.
eventually cause so much interference that we're in that cave and we're disturbing the bats, all of a sudden.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, you really do have to be careful, even if you are saying that this is a discarded thing that the animal doesn't
I
want.
I
You
think we can break things apart. I don't think we need to look at slippery slopes. I don't mind that you are, but if an animal poops and it's there in the forest and the animal's long gone, viewing how we would do the use that versus the idea of following that animal and grabbing it the second it falls out of them. We could view those as separate, and also view the cave as separate too, the dwelling, and also even separate from that. In the same way that we go out and we film and make documentaries on animals, if we ever discover that an animal goes back and reuses its own poop, then there could be an argument for that. So I think each thing is its own
Exactly. If
case.
they eat their own crap, which I guess some animals do that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
um, why would we be? It would be the same as like the chicken eating its own egg.
Yeah,
And
if it does, yeah, we just have to be aware of that, and
so
that
so
would affect our morals.
So my framing for when is it okay, comes down to the basis of, do you have that individual's consent? And that, for me, for a human, is why it becomes okay. So for example, something like breast milk, you have the mother's
Hmm.
consent, then
Hmm.
it's vegan. Whereas if it's a human, and so if I take a crap and I put it in a compost and I make a human manure compost and I'm just letting it sit there, doing its hot compost thing and letting it warm up. Eventually, it's going to break down. It's going to become just total compost. But in the meantime, it'll be a crap compost with my personal crap in it. Now, if it's on my property, you can't just come over and take my crap compost. That is mine.
Hmm.
It belongs to me. Uh, and if I push my compost, I sweep it into the street, I've essentially crossed that line where it's not mine anymore, because I have intentionally abandoned it, outside of what would normally be my domain of ownership, right? And so choosing for me to do that would be like me giving consent for you to come and take it.
I
You
just
know,
don't know if
it's
we can argue with domain when it comes to animals.
Well, they don't understand domains, so the
Yeah,
the
exactly.
the
Yeah.
right thing to do is to give them the entirety of the domain. Give them, because they're not going to be able to say, "Oh, I can only stay in this forest. I can't cross over into the concrete jungle over there where all these humans are walking around."
God, if
The
there's no.
bird crosses and thinks, "Hey, this whole planet is, for me to go to and do whatever I will and stay wherever I want. And if
Hmm.
some other species has a problem with it, maybe I'll go away." But they don't have that concept of ownership, so we should give them basically the rights to go wherever they want to, if it's not like, if there's not a conflict of rights. And that's what it would be, kind of like, that gets into the conversation of when is it okay, to shoot an animal. I guess if it's actively trying to kill you, you know you
Hmm.
could justify it. But like, if it's just in your territory, like a bird or something, like, and they decide to leave their egg, and if it's on your property, maybe there is a need if that egg starts like rotting to
Mm-hmm.
remove it, but I would not touch it before that point. I would not, because there's a chance, the bird might just be gone and you just don't know. And that's kind
Yeah.
of the problem with real life is most of these things, they're not really knowns, they're all unknowns. And so we have to act as though we have to give that benefit of a doubt. And in the same way, we give the animal its rights to sort of go throughout the entirety of the land, so they don't abandon their property ever, really. I mean, they might technically, and for them, be abandoning it. They might not give a crap, but we did not get their consent to take it because we don't they don't understand the laws of ownership, not even the laws, just the
Mm-hmm.
principles of ownership and property. But we humans do. So I know that if I put my, bicycle in the middle of the street and that's where I store it, like, that it's probably not going to be owned by me anymore because I've left it somewhere that is not on my property.
Yeah.
Um, and somebody taking it, like, they would be taking it and they'd probably be justified in taking it because this thing's in the fucking way at this point. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
so forget about that. And then essentially, if you were to leave it in your yard, you would know, okay, you cannot take this. You do not have my consent. So we understand
Mm-hmm.
that this basic concept, but animals do not have that. So for us to go and suddenly just take their stuff, we don't know.
Yeah.
That bird could have a friend who's watching you from the tree looking at you take the feather off the dead bird's body, or even, like, if it's not on the dead bird's body, if it's next to the dead bird's body, it's unattached, that bird could see you and go, it basically be disturbed and start attacking you. And
Mm-hmm.
birds will do that, like with eggs and stuff, or if they feel threatened, they'll start challenging you. And so
If
they do that with like cats all the time, right? Like, so, like, you know you taking the feather might offend the bird, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe in 100 years, maybe in 1,000 years, right? Like, this is things that happen over evolutionary time, and so principles are really just there to keep you at a distance, keep you
if
at
a
that distance where, like, you
if you had a
won't cross them.
window if you had a window open or a door open in your house and a bird feather fell from a feather as it was flying, and the feather kind of the wind brought it into your house, you're sweeping up, would it be reasonable to sweep it up and throw it in the garbage, or do you have to respect that feather and put it outside in case the bird wants to find it again? Does the bird have the opportunity to come in the house to find it?
I would say, well, oh, it's in your house. Well, if it's
Yeah,
definitely in
it
your house,
came in the house. Yeah.
yeah, if it came in the house, then I mean, it's kind of like that bird's never going to be able to get it. And putting it outside, that's not really what I mean here. It's just like because, like,
But is there more of a
that's
disrespect in sweeping it up with the rest of your sweeping you're doing and putting it in the garbage than it
if it
is to use it like my kid, my 7 year old I was talking about? She has like 50,000 bird feathers in her room. She puts them in a bag every time she's at the park. It's her favorite thing to grab. Not that the emotional part matters. It shouldn't matter how happy a kid is, or
Yeah.
we can adjust how our society views things. And I'm even fine with a society caring about bird feathers or whatever. Um, I'm just trying to imagine the difference between a kid getting a feather to play with or just saying, no, we need to respect it. Let's put it in the garbage.
Yep. So for me, it's the basis for it is that stewarding responsibility, or the stewarding obligation, which, if you do have like a feather in your house, I mean, it's not going to be perfectly free of bacteria. You live in this house, you need to remove it from your house because it's not a clean object. It's not, I mean, your stewarding responsibility, your stewarding obligation is now taking priority over your vegan obligation to leave it alone. So you
Let's
do
say
have
when the
other
wind let's say
obligations.
when the wind blows it into your house. So it fell off a bird, the wind blows it into your house. You happen to have a bucket that is labeled bird bacteria removal, and it's like a water of sorts, and it falls into that bucket, and then all the bacteria is removed, and then somebody kicks the bucket and it flies out of the bucket, and it passes in front of a fan and a heater at the same time and dries. So now it's back to normal feather structure. There's no bacteria. A kid
Hmm.
wants to grab it and play with it, or it could get swept up and thrown in the garbage.
Yeah, I wouldn't play with it. Even, basically, it sounds like basically like, so
But what's the
the idea.
value difference putting it in the garbage? Would you say that ideally somebody should like bury it and like view it as a not a mourning process because you don't have any close connection with the bird that you haven't even seen, so it's just a feather. But is there a respect that somebody should treat it how they treat their own dead, or is it just garbage because it doesn't have any moral value, but you don't want to disrespect it by playing with it?
So it's the commodification part that, like, we don't
What
want to
was that word you
use
just
it.
said? Oh,
Commodification.
commodification. I thought you
Yeah,
said something
we
else
don't.
and I was about to look it up, but then I realized what you said.
Okay. We don't want to use it in any way because then as soon as we use it, we're giving that impression that the vegan principle of leaving it alone because, some other animal, has really the ownership over it. The only time they lose ownership over it is when that stewarding responsibility comes into play. You need to remove this thing from your house or your property because of bacteria. If you decide, hey, this thing is actually not full of bacteria, I don't have to, do anything to, get rid of it. The fact that it's still inside your house is, I mean, I wouldn't, I would consider that now it's like putting it's like putting someone's human finger bone on display, I mean, right? Because like wouldn't it be like the human finger bone flew into your house and landed on your floor and then the same thing happened where the antibacterial stuff got like it got sprayed onto there and then now it's not full of bacteria anymore. Are you just going to leave this thing in your house? Well, I mean, it's it's an animal product because it came from an animal and
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to just suddenly like hang that on your wall and just be like, hey, I'm vegan in every respect besides the fact that I collect, you know body parts. Like
Mm.
it just doesn't fly with the principle of like being able to say like those animals deserve their respect. So like if you remove it from your house, you're doing a stewarding responsibility, regardless of whether or not it has bacteria. But pretty much the idea here is because it has bacteria on it, it's not going to be 100% free. You're going to have a stewarding responsibility to remove it from your premises. So you remove it from your premises. It doesn't really matter if you throw it in a compost or throw it in a trash. Like at that point, it's something you have to do because that's your responsibility. But if it's in the forest, you don't have that responsibility to the forest to be like, hey, I need to clean this feather off of get the bacteria off of it. At that point, the bacteria will become useful to the stuff in the compost and the soil where they break down, and turn it into the soil like you were talking about at the beginning. So,
Mm-hmm.
to me, like, and then kind of like just to touch on the guardian thing, because we didn't talk about that, but if you're the guardian of an animal, you have a stewarding responsibility to that animal to clean up its waste. So if you throw that waste into a compost, well, you already
Oh, you got muted. Hello? Yeah, it says you're muted. I don't know if you clicked your mute button somehow. Maybe, can I unmute you? It's not letting me unmute you. Cannot unmute your guest. Their mic isn't connected, it says. Oh, there you go. You're back.
There we go. Yeah, no, my headset disconnected for a second.
Oh,
Anyway,
gotcha. Mm-hmm.
just to wrap it up here. So on the stewarding responsibility thing of it, if you have guardianship over an animal, to me, the reason why the guardianship is like it basically allows you to dispose of the animal products is because you have a stewarding responsibility to that animal that is of greater importance than in this case the vegan principle to not touch the animal product or whatever it is, the animal body part. And so like that's where this separation comes in, because one moral obligation becomes the more important one and the one you ought to adhere to, even though it's still an obligation in every other circumstance to not to not use the animal, droppings or whatever. So like going out into the forest will be like the same as like entering their territory where they live and basically actively possibly disturbing them. And so you want to prevent against possibly disturbing them. And then as opposed to that, you would only steward on your own territory, because it's a responsibility you have to yourself as an individual who's alive, to your family, to any of your visitors, like those type of things. So like everything's a delicate balancing act, but once you understand I think the different principles that are at play, you can pick the one that in the very moment has the most importance, the most highest imperative to act on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, are you able to see chat? Are you able to see
What's
the
that?
chat? Are you able to see the chat from your computer?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
So
Yep, I
MCR
see.
and Faith,
Yep.
do you want to answer that? I think we kind of covered it, but just a real quick answer to his last question.
He said, I don't know if you guys covered the non-vegan potting mixes. Is it ethical to use something with turkey litter? Most products are animal based. Um, so like potting mixes for flowering. I don't think so, because if it is a animal waste and the industry is getting profit from animal waste, then definitely it should not be supported. So,
Yeah.
it's you can get compost without any animal waste in it, and there's no reason why you couldn't build your own. It's really not too hard. It's just a matter of like put all
Yeah.
your sticks and your grass clippings in a pile and just let them
Yeah.
decompose, for a couple months, and then
I
you'll
was going
have
to say
a
the same
bunch of
thing.
compost.
Yeah, depending on where you live, if you have a yard at all and you can have a little compost area or just a bucket, if you put all your food scraps and, yard clippings, that kind of thing, it will turn into good compost. You can buy compost at the store that's just compost from nature breaking down, not from all those things. So I lean towards that direction, but at the same time, I view things on a scale. So in the grand scheme of things, with all the bad things one can do in the world, I kind of view the manure and whatnot of animals as more of a byproduct. And even though it's probably better to not support those companies and make their prices lower and whatnot, um, I would say that people should have a higher focus on cutting out meat, dairy, eggs, that kind of stuff, and not overwhelming themselves. If they want to, plant a flower, do it, and just keep learning and growing and figuring out new approaches to things you want to do by what you learn. So
Agreed.
yeah.
All right, Carson, I'll let you go. Good talk today. I hope did you feel like we got to most of the
Mhm.
topics here? Did a good job
Yeah, no,
with
it's
that?
great. I like breaking those things down. We disagree, and it's interesting to see how that kind of thing goes. Hopefully, people don't think I'm too crazy by the detail of what happened to grandma's body in the living room or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good talk, and we'll have to set up another one soon.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I was glad that I got to kind of go over the whole feather thing today. I know it's been
Hmm.
a
Well,
recent topic of conversation, so I
yeah,
just
and
wanted to
you
put my
you
two
gave
cents
me
in.
a lot to think about when it comes to the wording of consideration, and so yeah, I'm gonna ponder that further, re-listen to our talk, and yeah, we'll talk about it further.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later, Carson.
All right, take care.
See ya.